and we're finishing up chapter 14. Margit turns up while Dita is waiting for Liesel to reappear. From the distraught expression on her face, it's clear that Margit has heard about Dita's father. In Auschwitz, news, and bad news in particular, spreads fast. Margit walks up to her and gives her a hug. "How's your father?" Dita knows that this question hides another more serious one. Will he live? "He's not well. He has a high fever and his chest rattles when he breathes." "You must have faith, Dita. Your father has overcome many things." "Too many." "He's a strong man. He'll fight." "He was strong, Margit. But these past few years have aged him a lot. I've always been an optimist, but I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know any more if we'll all be able to hold out." "Of course we will." "Are you so sure?" Her friend remains silent for a few seconds, biting her lip as she searches for the answer. "Because I want to believe it." The two girls don't say another word. The age when you think that just wanting something is enough to make it happen is slipping away from them. The curfew siren goes off, and her mother emerges from the hut like a ghost, dragging its feet through mud. "We must hurry," says Margit. "You go. Run," Dita replies. We'll come a bit more slowly." Her friend says goodbye, and mother and daughter are left by themselves. Her mother looks lost. "How's Papa?" "A bit better," Liesel replies, but her voice is so broken it gives the lie to what she is saying. And anyway, Dita knows her all too well. Liesel has spent her entire life trying to make everything right, attempting to ensure that nothing alters the natural order of things. "Did he recognize you?" "Yes, of course." "So did he say anything to you?" "No. He was a bit tired. He'll be better tomorrow." And then they don't say another word until they reach their hut. "He'll be better tomorrow." Her mother said it with a conviction that left no room for doubt, and mothers know these things. Dita takes her mother's hand, and they walk more quickly. When they enter the hut, almost all the women are already lying down on their bunks, and they come face to face with the capo, a Hungarian with the orange badge of a common criminal, a superior status. A thief, a swindler, a murderess. Any one of these is more valuable than a Jew. She's been overseeing the placement of the containers used by the women to relieve themselves during the night, and when she sees Dita and her mother arriving late, she lifts the stick in her hand threateningly. "I'm sorry, capo, but my father—" "Shut up and get on your pallet, idiot." "Yes, madam." Dita pulls on her mother's hand, and they walk to their bunks. Liesel slowly climbs up, and before lying down briefly turns toward Dita. Her lips don't move, but her eyes show her pain. "Don't worry, Mama," says her daughter encouragingly. "If there's no change in Papa, we'll talk to his capo in the morning about taking him to the doctor. If need be, I'll speak with the director of Block 31. Freddie Hirsch will be able to help us. He'll be better tomorrow." The lights go out, and Dita says goodnight to her bunkmate, who doesn't respond. She's so distressed that she can't even close her eyes. She recalls images of her father and tries to sort out the best ones. There's one she especially likes. It's of her parents seated at the piano. Both of them are elegant and handsome. Her father in a white shirt with the cuffs rolled up, a dark tie, and suspenders. Her mother in a fitted blouse that accentuates her waist. They're laughing, because it's obvious they can't find a way to coordinate their movements to play a four-handed piece. They are happy. Dita remembers when they left Prague, that moment when they walked out the front door and put their suitcases on the landing. They were getting ready to close a door that they didn't know if they'd ever open again. Her father went back inside the apartment for a moment, while mother and daughter watched him from the landing. He walked up to the sideboard in the living dining room and twirled the world globe one last time. And Dita finally falls asleep. But her sleep is restless. Something is disturbing her. As dawn is breaking, she wakes up with a start, convinced that someone has called her. Uneasy, she opens her eyes, her heart beating loudly. The only things next to her are the feet of her sleeping bunkmate, and the only sounds disturbing the silence are the snores and muttering of the women talking in their sleep. It was just a nightmare, but Dita is filled with a sense of foreboding. She's convinced that it was her father who was calling her. First thing in the morning, the camp fills with guards and capos for the morning roll call. It's a 2-hour roll call, which feels like the longest of her life. She keeps exchanging glances with her mother while they are lined up. Talking is forbidden, although in this instance, it's almost better not to exchange words. When they finally break ranks, they take advantage of the endless lines for breakfast to go to Barrack 15. As they approach it, Mr. Brady steps out of his breakfast line, his shoulders weighed down by his bad news. "My husband, is he worse?" asks Liesel, her voice breaking. He's dead. How can you sum up a life in just 2 very short words? Will we be able to go inside and see him? Asks Liesel. I'm sorry, but they've already taken him away. Dita and her mother ought to know that. The bodies are picked up at first light, piled into a cart, and taken away to be incinerated in the ovens. Dita's mother seems to sway back and forth for a moment, on the verge of breaking down. At first glance, the news of his death hasn't overly unsettled her. She probably knew from the moment she saw him lying on his bunk. Not being able to say goodbye to him has been a blow. Liesel quickly recovers her composure, however, and puts her hand on her daughter's shoulder to console her. At least your father didn't suffer. Dita, who senses her blood is beginning to boil, finds being addressed as a child even more irritating than her mother's words. Didn't suffer, she replies, brusquely shrugging off her mother's hand. They took away his world, his house, his dignity, his health, and finally they let him die alone like a dog on a flea-infested pallet. Isn't that enough suffering? And she almost shouts those last words. That's what God wanted, Edita. We must resign ourselves. Dita shakes her head again and again in disagreement. I don't feel like resigning myself, she screams in the middle of the Lagerstrasse, but hardly anyone pays attention to her. If I had God in front of me, I'd tell him what I thought of him and his twisted sense of compassion. She feels bad, and even worse when she realizes she's been very rude to her mother, just when what her mother needs most is comfort and support. But she can't stop feeling furious at her mother's docility. She's relieved when Mrs. Ternovska appears, wrapped in her enormous shawl. She must already know what has happened. She squeezes Dita's arm affectionately and warmly hugs Liesel, who grabs hold of her friend with unexpected feeling. This is what I should have done, Dita thinks to herself. Hug my mother. But she can't. She's too angry to give hugs. She feels the urge to bite and destroy, just as they've destroyed her. 3 more women, whom Dita barely knows by sight, appear and start to cry noisily. Dita, her own eyes dry, look at them in utter bewilderment. They approach her mother, but Mrs. Ternovska steps in. Get away from her. Go. We just want to express our condolences to the lady. If you don't leave in the next 10 seconds, I'll kick you on your way. Liesel is too shocked to understand what's going on, and Dita doesn't have the strength to apologize to the women and ask them to stay. What are you doing, Mrs. Ternovska? Has the whole world gone mad? They're scavengers. They know that family members of the dead lose their appetites when they are upset, so they pretend to cry crocodile tears and then make off with your food ration. Dita is stunned. She hates the whole world at the moment. She asks Mrs. Ternovska to look after her mother and walks away. It's not that she's having difficulty getting used to the idea that she'll never be with her father again, but rather that she doesn't want to get used to it. She's not prepared to accept it. She's not going to resign herself to it, not now, not ever. She walks off, her hands clenched and her knuckles white. A white-hot rage burns inside her. He'll never come back from work in his double-breasted suit and felt hat, or glue his ear to the radio as he gazes up at the ceiling. He'll never sit her on his knees again to show her the countries of the world, or gently scold her for her crooked writing. And she can't even cry for him. Her eyes are dry, and that makes her even madder. Since she has nowhere else to go, her feet take her to Block 31. The children are busy with breakfast, and she goes to the back of the hut without stopping, heading for her refuge behind the wood pile. She's startled to find a solitary figure seated on the bench in the corner. Morgenstern greets her with his old-fashioned politeness, but this time Dita doesn't smile, and the old professor stops his theatrical bowing. My father. And as she said it, Dita feels her blood start to boil as it runs through her veins, and a single word rises in her throat like bile. Murderers. She rolls it around her mouth and repeats it 5, 10, 50 times. Murderers, 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 murderers! She kicks a stool and then grabs it and brandishes it like a mace. Like a mace. She wants to smash something, but doesn't know what. She wants to hit someone, but doesn't know who. Her eyes are wild and her anxiety is making her gasp. Professor Morgenstern stands up with surprising agility for such a frail-looking old man and removes the stool gently but firmly from her hand. I'll kill them, Dita cries out angrily. I'll get a hold of a gun and kill them. No, Edita, no, he says to her very gently. Our hatred is a victory for them. Dita trembles, and the professor puts his arms around her. She buries her head in the old man's arms. Several teachers and a troop of curious boys and girls poke their heads over the top of the woodpile, alarmed by the noise, and the professor puts a finger to his lips to tell them to be quiet, and then signals with his head for them to go away. Amazed to see the professor so serious, they obey, and leave them on their own. Dita confesses to the professor that she hates herself for running away, for being unable to cry, for failing her father, for not being able to save him. She hates herself for everything, but the old professor tells her that her tears will come when her anger departs. How can I not feel angry? My father never hurt anyone. He never showed disrespect toward anyone. And they took everything away from him, and now, in this revolting hole, they've even taken away his life. Listen very carefully to me, Adita. Those who go no longer suffer. Those who go no longer suffer, he whispers to her over and over again. Morgenstern knows that the comfort he's offering is scant, worn out, and old-fashioned, something old people say, but in Auschwitz, it's the medicine that helps people to endure the sadness they feel for those who have died. Dita stops twisting her fingers, nods in agreement, and slowly sits down on the bench. Professor Morgenstern puts his hand in his pocket and pulls out a somewhat wrinkled and faded origami bird. He offers it to Dita. The girl looks at the battered paper bird, as vulnerable as her father has been recently, as fragile as the mad old professor with his broken glasses. They're all so fragile. And then she feels insignificant and unexpectedly weak. Her rage subsides, and the tears finally flow. The old architect nods approvingly, and she cries her heart out on old Morgenstern's shoulder. Those who go no longer suffer. No one knows how much suffering still awaits those left behind. Dita raises her head and wipes her tears with her sleeve. She thanks the professor and tells him that she has something important to do before breakfast is over. She rushes off to her hut. Her mother needs her. Or maybe she needs her mother. What difference does it make? Her mother is sitting with Mrs. Chernovska on top of the air intake of the unlit stove, and as she approaches the two women, Dita sees her mother sitting very still, lost in thought, while Mrs. Chernovska, her own empty bowl on the ground, is drinking the morning tea from Liesel's bowl, and dipping into it a small piece of bread which the just widowed Liesel must have left uneaten the night before. The former fruit seller looks embarrassed when she sees Dita staring at her mother's bowl. "Your mother didn't want it," she says, somewhat taken aback by Dita's unexpected appearance, which has caught her red-handed. "I kept insisting, and it was almost time to go off to the workshop. We would have had to throw it away." Dita and Mrs. Chernovska look at each other in silence. Her mother is far away. She must be going through a world of memories. Mrs. Chernovska extends the bowl toward Dita so she can have the last few sips, but Dita shakes her head. There's no reproach in her eyes, just a mixture of understanding and sadness. "Please finish it. We need you to be healthy so you can help Mama." Her mother's serene face resembles a statue made out of wax. Dita crouches down in front of her, and her mother reacts by moving her eyes. She focuses on her daughter, and her neutral expression finally breaks. Dita hugs her hard, holds her tightly, and at last her mother cries. That's all for today, friends.